Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we normally discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. But today, any Grateful Dead fans out there? I've been going through some of my classic rock records and thinning the herd of some things I just don't listen to anymore. And man, I haven't listened to the Dead. I've got this and Terrapin Station on vinyl and haven't listened to the Dead in ages. And so I threw it on and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Actually really liked it. And the Dead are, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a huge fan of the Dead. I don't really know a whole lot about them. Like I said, I've got the greatest hits and Terrapin Station, and I've listened to them a little bit here and there, but they're an interesting band because for me, in my history, where I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, it seemed like there were a ton of Deadheads, and this stuff was really popular. And when I was turning 21, there were bands that just played this kind of jam band, 60s, 70s type of stuff, tons of Grateful Dead. You'd see the tie-dye, people in the tie-dyed shirts all over if you went out. So it just seemed like the Dead were really popular. I had friends that were really into them. You heard them on the local classic rock station a lot. Friend of the Devil, Sugar Magnolia, Truckin', Casey Jones, all that stuff. And although I was never able to totally get into them, they were never quite heavy enough for me. They never jammed hard enough for me, even though I liked like some late 60s, 70s stuff like Hendrix and Cream and stuff like that. That stuff was heavier to me. The Dead was never quite heavy enough for me. They had kind of this folky influence to what they did. I've come to appreciate it over the years, and I've listened to them a little bit more, but again, I can never just totally embrace them. But it's kind of funny. They, like I said, they were kind of everywhere when I was younger. It seemed like there were so many people that were into them, and I don't know if it was just a time frame, that kind of late 80s, early 90s. And I actually saw the Dead live. This was about maybe a year or two before Jerry died. And at the time I was living in Northern Virginia, and I was playing in a band. I was living in the Arlington Falls Church, at that time Falls Church area. And I was playing in a band, and the drummer in the band, he was a Deadhead. And I mean, he was for like 10, 12 years of his life. He had a VW bus, which was on bricks in his front yard when I knew him. But he traveled around in a VW bus, eating out of trash cans, making a living by doing illegal things, selling illegal things and stuff like that. I mean, he totally lived that lifestyle. So whenever the Dead would come through DC or the Virginia, Maryland area, his house turned into like a flop house. All his Deadhead friends would come and stay at his house and everything. So the one year when they were coming through, he said, "Hey, they're coming to, I can't remember, this stadium that the Washington football team played at, the Redskins played at." He said, "They're coming, you want to go with me?" And I was like, yeah, I'd like to experience this. And I'm so glad I went with him, because for him, this was like a family reunion. And I mean, this was, for those who most people probably know this and remember this, the Dead, they had a huge following, and these people that followed them around, set up in the parking lot and everything. And going with him, this was like a family reunion for him. So we were walking through the parking lot, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so." And he's talking to all these people, introducing me to all these like hardcore people. I mean, he had stopped following them 5-7 years before that, but there were people that were like there with their little kids and stuff like that. They're selling beads and cooking hot dogs, selling hot dogs and stuff like that. So it was just really fascinating, and it was really interesting kind of tagging along with him, meeting all these people. We hung out in the parking lot for hours before the show. Then when the show started, it was cool. I got to admit, it was pretty neat. There was a real vibe to it. I remember everybody was freaking out because they played a song that they hadn't played in like 10 years or something like that. And that was the cool thing about the Dead, and something that I really respected, that their set list varied so much that they could play anything at any time. You never knew what they were going to play. You never knew what songs they were going to cover. You never knew how long they were going to jam on certain songs, a song might go on really long one night. And so it was a real experience. It was a unique experience. What you were getting at that show wasn't going to be duplicated on another night. And I really respect that. I've talked about this on the channel. I wish bands would vary their set lists up more, because I think one of the problems now is that the bands go out and they play the exact same show every night. And if you do have a chance to see a band more than once, you'll even a lot of times hear them saying the same dialogue and the same stage moves and stuff like that. And it's really... And you've heard me rant on the channel about people using backing tracks and stuff like that. That makes it even more like canned and stiff and everything. So it reminded me, as I was listening to this record, how cool of a thing that the Grateful Dead had going on, that they had this legion of people who followed them around. Part of it was the music, part of it was other things, extracurriculars that happened in the parking lot. But there's no denying that they created their own little traveling village, and I think that was a really cool thing. And the fact that they did vary it up a lot with the music, and you never knew what you were going to get. And thus, there were people that were tape collectors, like my friend that took me to the show. He had a huge cassette collection, like hundreds of Dead shows, and he could tell you, this show, New York 75, Madison Square Garden, they played this song, and then they never played that song again for another 12 years or whatever. He just was really into it like that, and I just thought that was really cool. I'm not sure there's anything quite like that anymore. Is there, where people basically their whole lives revolve around a band like that, where they follow the band all over the world? And the Dead, they weren't really known as a studio album band. I don't really know their history, how many studio albums they have. I don't think they have that many. And it just occurs to me right now that when I was starting to, my late teens, mid-teens, was when they sort of came back and had that touch of gray. So they were all over MTV, and I think that probably helped, get people excited about the Dead. And maybe that's why I was seeing so much of the Dead, like in where I lived, and it just sort of caught on in that area. But I don't know, are there any bands that are like that anymore? I mean, I know there's still jam bands that go out there and play. I did a video on talking about Widespread Panic and how they have their own kind of radio streaming show and everything. But I don't know, is there anything like the Dead anymore? I don't know. So what do you guys, is there anybody out there that's fans of the Dead? Let me know. Anybody seen them live? I remember when Jerry died and how crushed my friend was. I remember going over his house, and his phone, but the days before cell phones, his house phone was just ringing off the hook, because, and I remember he got word of it before it had even, made it into to the radio and the press and stuff like that. So how about you guys out there? What are your thoughts on the Dead? I know this is pretty far outside the hard rock and heavy metal thing, but there's got to be some fans out there, right? What do you guys think of the Dead? Have you ever seen them live? Who's out there that is there anybody out there that does this anymore, where they're basically a touring band and studio albums are almost just like, just something that they just do every now and then? It's the studio albums were never really that big of a part of the Grateful Dead, which is interesting. It was all about the live show and touring for them. So let me know out there what you guys think, what your experiences are with the Grateful Dead. Let me know in the comments down below. Till we see you again, make sure you keep on trucking.